الشيطان اللعين الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على خاتم الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا ونبينا محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين، ولعنة الله على أعدائهم ومنكر فضائلهم من الآن إلى قيام يوم الدين. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. Respected elders, brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Approximately 300 years after the death of Musa alayhi salam, Bani Israel found themselves under the tyranny of the Philistines, which was an invading people that had conquered Canaan and some of their surrounding areas. It was almost a repeat of what they experienced under Fir'aun. Now, because of their corruption and their iniquities and their rebelliousness, the law of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala dictates that when you abandon your religious responsibilities, particularly the obligation of enjoining good and forbidding evil, the most wicked of people gain power over you. The situation became so severe that Bani Israel had made a decision that enough is enough. We have to fight for our faith, for our lives, and for our land. And hence they turned to the prophet who was among them. The Quran doesn't mention his name, but the narrations and the biblical sources indicate that it was Prophet Samuel. And they said to him, "Appoint for us a king. We want to fight in the way of God. Ib'ath lana malikan nuqatil fi sabilillah." Now, of course, Prophet Samuel was not overtaken by the lofty rhetoric, so he questioned their steadfastness. And after they insisted that, no, why would we not fight in the way of God when we have been driven out of our homes and we've been separated from our children? As soon as the obligation of fighting was prescribed, the majority of them were unwilling to fight. And last night we mentioned that Prophet Samuel was too old to lead Bani Israel to battle. So he turns to Allah and asks Allah to appoint for them a king, someone who would lead them into battle and someone who would effectively be the successor of Prophet Samuel. And this is where Prophet Samuel, he says, "Inna Allah qad ba'atha alaykum taluta malika," that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, "Inna Allah فقال له النبي إن الله قد بعث لكم طالوت ملكا," that Allah has appointed Talut as a king over you. This is what they wanted. They wanted a king. But they had their own expectations of what this king would be and what qualities this king would have. They were unhappy with who Allah chose. They say, قالوا أَنَّا يَكُونَ لَهُ الْمُلْكُ عَلَيْنَا. How could he have authority over us? وَنَحْنُ أَحَقُّ بِالْمُلْكِ مِنْ. We are more deserving of this kingship. وَلَمْ يُؤْتَ سَعَةً مِنَ الْمَالِ. He's not rich. He doesn't have enough money. My dear brothers and sisters, the stories of Bani Israel are not just for entertainment. It's not just a pastime to read them. Anytime Allah mentions Bani Israel, there is a lesson for the Muslims. Doesn't this sound very familiar to some of the superficial objections to the Khilafah of Ali ibn Abi Talib? Allah chose him, but the Muslims were unhappy. Oh, he's too young. He's too young. What does age have to do with it? If Allah chose him, who cares how old he is? Allah chose Talut. The majority of the religious community, he wasn't good enough for them because he doesn't have enough money. Because the criterion in their minds is money. That is the marker of success. And this is where Prophet Samuel, he says, Allah chose him because of his physical strength and because of his vast knowledge. He has the qualities necessary for this position. Yes, he's not wealthy. Yes, he doesn't hail from the descendants of Levi or the other noble tribes within Bani Israel. He's from the progeny of Binyamin. And as I said last night, this was also an implicit reminder to the Jews in Medina who rejected the prophethood of Rasulullah on the grounds that, oh, he's from the progeny of Ismail, we don't accept him. History repeats itself. Talut was from the progeny of Binyamin. Sorry, not good enough for us. We need someone from the progeny of Levi, the other brother of Yusuf. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling them that my criterion is not like yours. You don't dictate to me who is worthy of leadership. Now, after Saul is appointed as king, of course, there was resistance. There was opposition to his appointment. In ayah 248 of Surah Al-Baqarah, Prophet Samuel, he says, وَقَالَ لَهُمْ نَبِيُّهُمْ, and their prophet said to them, Prophet Samuel said to Bani Israel, إِنَّ آيَةَ مُلْكِهِ أَنْ يَأْتِيكُمُ التَّابُوتِ فِيهِ سَكِينَةٌ مِّن رَبِّكُمْ. A sign of his kingship is that the Ark of the Covenant will return. And in it will be tranquility from your Lord. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to remove any doubt that Talut is divinely appointed, he manifests a miracle. If you remember last night, we mentioned that the Philistines, one of the things that they did is that they stole the Tabut from Bani Israel. And this Tabut, this wooden box, it's referred to as the Ark of the Covenant. It's a Tabut. The Tabut, as I mentioned last night, the narrations tell us that it was a wooden box that the mother of Musa used. She put Musa as an infant in that wooden box and she placed him in the Nile. So this Tabut has historical and religious significance, number one. And this Tabut was a source of tranquility for Bani Israel. This is why they used to take the Tabut with them when they used to go to the battlefields. They used to draw inspiration from it. It was a visual reminder of how Allah can give us victory even when the odds are heavily stacked up against us. You know, imagine how much strength we would derive if we went to battle and we saw Dhul Fiqar in front of us. It was the same idea. Now this Tabut, what is it precisely, in addition to being the wooden box that was used to place the infant Musa in? The ayah continues, وَبَقِيَّةٌ مِّمَّا تَرَكَ آلُ مُوسَى وَآلُ هَارُونَ. This Tabut, the Ark of the Covenant, this wooden box. Not only was it the box that held Musa when he was in the Nile and it protected him, but this box also contains relics from the household of Musa and the household of Harun. In this tabut, for example, the staff of Musa was preserved. The asa of Musa was there. The sandals of Musa were preserved in this tabut. You know in the Quran where Allah says to Musa, اخلع نعليك إنك بالوادي المقدس طوى. O Musa, remove your sandals. You are in the sacred valley of Tuwa. Those sandals were preserved by the successor of Musa. It was there. The turban of Harun and other relics were there. You see, brothers and sisters, the Quran here is highlighting that the possessions of God's chosen servants, they also have sanctity. If the sandal of Musa and the staff of Musa and this tabut that contains the possessions of Musa is this valuable and constitutes a miracle, then what can we say about the flesh and the blood of Rasulullah in the form of Ahlul Bayt? If the sandal of Musa and the staff of Musa has sanctity, how about the flesh and the blood of the Prophet, the living legacy of Rasulullah? وَبَقِيَّةٌ مِّمَّا تَرَكَ آلُ مُوسَى وَآلُ هَارُونَ تَحْمِلُهُ الْمَلَائِكَةُ. The Ark of the Covenant, the Tabut, returned into the possession of Saul, of Talut, through a miracle. How did it return? The Malaika transported it back to Talut. So suddenly, Bani Israel, they see that Saul, he has the lost Tabut. It became a sign of his legitimacy. إِنَّ فِي ذَلِكَ لَآيَةً لَكُمْ. In that, in the return of the Tabut, there is a sign if you only believe. Now what is this sakina? As I mentioned, the word sakina means tranquility. And this tabut did not bring tranquility to all of the Israelites. Only those who had iman in their hearts. You know, when Allah speaks about sakina, for example in Surah Al-Fath, Surah 48, ayah number 4, هو الذي أنزل السكينة في قلوب المؤمنين. Allah, He sends down tranquility to the hearts of the believers. لِيَزْدَادُوا إِيمَانًا مَعَ إِيمَانِهِمْ. To increase their already existing faith. So anyone among Bani Israel who already has iman, the tabut increases them in iman when they are in the presence of this tabut. And therefore, they used to bring this tabut to battle, because this is when you need to have strong iman in order to overcome your enemies. So after this mu'jiza, everyone accepts, okay, now there's no room for us to debate whether Talut is actually chosen by God or not. Ayah number 249 of Surah Al-Baqarah. فَلَمَّا فَصَلَ طَالُوتُ بِالْجُنُودِ قَالَ إِنَّ اللَّهَ مُبْتَلِيكُمْ بِنَهَرٍ. As Talut set out with the armies, now in terms of how large his army was, the Old Testament says he had 3,000 soldiers with him. And the intent is to go and face against the army of Goliath and recapture Canaan, recapture our land, restore our dignity, liberate our people from slavery. So as he leads his men towards the enemy forces, he says to them, they're passing by a river and they're thirsty. It's hot. He says, إِنَّ اللَّهَ مُبْتَلِيكُمْ بِنَهَرٍ. Allah will test you with a river. What is the test? So imagine you are a soldier in the army of Saul, of Talut. You're traveling a long distance. You're thirsty, you're tired. And he says, as the general, فَمَنْ شَرِبَ مِنْهُ فَلَيْسَ مِنِّي. Whoever drinks from this river is not from me. Meaning what? You are dismissed from the army. You have to go back. You're not allowed to remain a part of my army if you drink from the river. وَمَنْ لَمْ يُطْعِمْهُ فَإِنَّهُ مِنِّي. And whoever doesn't drink from the river is one of me, and you stay in the army. إِلَّا مَنْ اغْتَرَفَ غُرْفَةً بِيَدِهِ. Whoever doesn't drink is with me. Whoever drinks a lot of water is not with me, has to leave, is expelled. But whoever just takes a scoop of water, that's an exemption. I'll let that slide. I'll allow you to drink. Now, it's very difficult to speak about this ayah without making a comment about Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tested these men and said essentially that if you want to remain in the army of Talut, it is haram for you to drink from the river. When you look at Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas alayhi salam, was it haram for him to drink from the Furat? It wasn't haram, and he still didn't do it. Because of his loyalty to his commander, and that is Imam al-Hussein. If Talut were to say to his soldiers, drink, they would have all drank. But with Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas, no. I will not drink unless my master drinks. There is no one in the army of Saul who matches the discipline of Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas. In any case, وَمَنْ لَمْ يُطْعِمْهُ فَإِنَّهُ مِنِّي إِلَّا مَنْ اغْتَرَفَ غُرْفَةً بِيَدِهِ. But those who do not drink from it will belong to me, Talut, he says, except someone who draws a scoop with his hand. So what happens? فَشَرِبُوا مِنْهُ إِلَّا قَلِيلًا مِنْهُمْ. The majority of the army drank from the river. Now why is Talut doing this? Because Talut alayhi salam, he knows from the comments and from his past experience, he knows that the majority of his army doesn't actually want to fight. They're all talk. He's a man of wisdom. When he heard Prophet Samuel questioning the resolve, he knew that there are a lot of people in this army who don't belong. So we need to begin a filtration process. We need to filter out the disloyal, weak-hearted soldiers. The majority of them drank. That means what? The majority of the army was dismissed. He said, go back. Now, Talut knows that if I take an army where the majority of them don't actually want to fight, it's a suicide mission. Because if I go to battle and tens of and hundreds start to retreat, my entire army will be demoralized. So I have to take with me the elite. So one thing that a wise leader does is that he takes stock of his people. He evaluates the level of commitment among his people. And this is why when you look at the dhuhur of the 12th Imam, the Imam has two categories of followers. He has ashab and he has ansar. He has companions and he has supporters. He knows who his inner core is. He knows who is fully committed and who is partially committed. We need to know this as community leaders, as organizational leaders. You need to know who your core is, who you can depend on. You have to know that not everyone is the same. You have to be able to look past the talk and determine who is truly committed. And you can only know who is truly committed under stress tests. There needs to be tests. There needs to be difficulties. So Talut understands that if we are going to defeat the army of Goliath, the help of Allah will only come if we have a fully committed army that is doing this purely for Allah. We don't need these people. They need to be removed. Otherwise, they will jeopardize the victory. So the majority of the army is dismissed. Who now remains with Talut? Those who did not drink and those who just took a scoop of water. Those who drank a lot, they were dismissed. So now the army of Talut is comprised of two ranks. Those who are fully committed, who did not drink a drop of water, and those who drank a little bit of water, who are partially committed. So there's that first test that took place. The ayah continues, فَلَمَّا جَاوَزَ هُوَ وَالَّذِينَ آمَنُوا مَعَهُ. So when he crossed it, when he, Saul, Talut, crossed the river, along with the faithful who were with him, those who did not drink and those who took a scoop, they were the faithful ones who remained. قَالُوا لَا طَاقَةَ لَنَا الْيَوْمَ بِجَالُوتَ وَجُنُودِهِ. They said, we have no strength today against Goliath and his troops. Which of the two groups you think made this comment? The ones who took a scoop, they are the ones who eventually broke. And they said, we don't have, when they saw the huge army of Goliath, they said, we don't have the strength to face this army. And then what does the ayah say? قَالَ الَّذِينَ يَظُنُّونَ أَنَّهُمْ مُلَاقُوا اللَّهِ. Those who were certain that they would encounter Allah. They said what? كَم مِّن فِئَةٍ قَلِيلَةٍ غَلَبَتْ فِئَةً كَثِيرَةً بِإِذْنِ اللَّهِ. Those who were certain of their encounter with Allah. Who do you think that group is? The ones who did not drink anything. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions the one thing that made these two groups different. One had partial faith in the akhirah, and one had yaqeen in the akhirah. If you want to be truly disciplined, it will only come if you have certainty and conviction in life after death. But if you're a little bit shaky, you're not going to have the same level of resolve and commitment. So you see that those who did not drink, they exhibited the highest level of discipline and faith. They were the ones who said, how many times has a small group defeated a large group with the permission of Allah? They were fearless. They were fearless when they saw an army that was larger than them in a numerical sense. But it did not shake them because of their yaqeen, because of their certainty. Now, one of the things that we draw, one of the lessons that we benefit from this story of Talut is, number one, as I mentioned last night, the story begins with what? It begins with a highly motivated community. They were very motivated. As we go back, if we go back to the ayah, if we go back to ayah number 246, إِذْ قَالُوا لِنَبِيٍّ لَهُمْ إِبْعَثْ لَنَا مَلِكًا نُقَاتِلَ فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ. This is the same community that said to Prophet Samuel, appoint for us a king so that we can fight in the way of Allah. They were motivated. They were committed, at least in terms of their words. They were motivated. This story highlights what? The story highlights that motivation is not enough. You know, these days everyone is looking for motivation. I want a motivational clip. I want to be motivated. Bani Israel, they were motivated. But do you know what the problem is with motivation? It doesn't last. Motivation fades. When things get difficulty, you lose motivation. The ones who succeeded are not the ones who were just motivated, because everyone was motivated in the beginning. The ones who had discipline, they were the ones who achieved success. Because anyone can identify what the problem is and what needs to be done. But very few people translate ideas and rhetoric into action. That's the first lesson. Stop making excuses about I'm not motivated. No, motivation is not going to do it for you. Even if you ask the most athletic people in the world, are they always motivated to exercise? No. In fact, most of the time they're not motivated. But they do it anyway, and that's what separates them from the rest. Are you always going to be motivated to pray Salatul Fajr? You're not. But you do it because you're a person of discipline. And you know that Allah in His infinite wisdom, He would not prescribe something unless it was beneficial. It's not about motivation. It's about discipline and commitment. That's number one. Number two, the second lesson that we draw from this narrative is, and this is a very, very important one, good followership is just as, or sometimes even more important than good leadership. Sometimes we obsess about who the leader is. And in many cases, Allah blesses us with leaders who are sufficiently good. They're not perfect. And I'm talking about on a community level. We might not have perfect leaders, but we have leaders who are good enough. The problem is, throughout history, most of the time it's the problem with the followers. Allah sent 124,000 impeccable leaders. The majority of them were not able to bring about victory. The problem wasn't with the leaders. The problem was with the followers. You know, oftentimes we have leadership workshops. I think we need to have followership workshops. Because our primary identity is what? Shia of Ahlul Bayt. And that means followers of Ahlul Bayt. Some of us, we haven't learned how to be followers, and we expect to be leaders. What makes a good leader is that they first learn how to be good followers. What made Ali an exceptional leader is that he was the best follower of Rasulullah. We need to learn how to be good followers. Bani Israel, they were looking for an imperfection. They were looking for a shortcoming in their leader. They were trying to find a reason to disqualify Talut. Sometimes you have to humble yourself and say that this person is sufficiently good, even though they might not fit my criterion for the perfect leader, but I will participate and I will serve the greater cause. Everyone wanted to be a king in the story. When Prophet Samuel appointed Talut, that we should be kings. Why is he a king? How come I'm not a king? Sometimes we have to learn how to serve without having a title. Sometimes we have to serve in the way of Allah without having a position. And as we will see in the story, the star in the battle is going to be Dawood. And he doesn't have a title at this point. And finally, brothers and sisters, another lesson that we learn is what we value is often not the same as what Allah values. Allah values knowledge. He values humility. he values taqwa. People, they value what family does he come from, how much money does he have. That's the criteria. And finally, do not underestimate or trivialize any command of God. The army of Saul was probably thinking to themselves, what does drinking water have to do with fighting a battle? It seems counterintuitive. If I want to go to battle, I should be hydrated. This is a reminder that sometimes the laws of God may seem counterintuitive, but we still have to submit because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. وآخر دعوانا الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على محمد وآله الطاهرين.
When you have auto